Well, it is 1 o'clock, and in the interest of respecting everybody's time, we'll go ahead and get started today. Mr. Reader, I'm assuming it's okay with you if we go ahead and get started.
I hereby publicly acknowledge that Robert Sears has the floor.
So, we've got a couple of guests today to talk a little bit about a couple of things. Drew Sebelius and Peter Hinkle are here today from Schneider Electric. They're going to talk a little bit about some low-cost energy grants. Really, we've kind of backed off the loan piece we had looked at, but some grants that we are looking at. They're going to share some information about those with you that will allow us maybe to do some additional energy-saving projects. And so, and then Lachlan's going to talk a little bit about our health insurance, kind of how things have looked for last year, what we're looking at moving forward. I'll share some info about where we're at with the healthcare trust. And then if we have any open things, we can discuss those. So, without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Drew and Peter.
Hey everybody, thanks again for letting us come out, and just wanted to kind of give an update from where we were in the November timeframe to kind of where we are today. Robert mentioned a couple of grants that we had looked at and incentives. The one that we kind of settled on that makes the most sense at this point in time, one with timing of things, and then two with just kind of looking at the rates and paybacks on a few different items, was this Renew America Schools grant program. So I put together just a quick flyer, one-page handout for you all to kind of see and look at. I won't read it to you, I'll just kind of give you the highlights, but the grant itself is about $500 million. This cycle is about $80 million worth of overall opportunity. So that means on a national level, they're going to give about $80 million to a variety of school districts, all K through 12, based upon need, centered on really 3 or 4 core areas. Those core areas include learning environments, like things like indoor air quality, energy efficiency is obviously a pretty big one, and then looking at the impoverished zones or the low interest or the free and reduced lunch opportunity for kind of supplying money and funds to districts in need. And so where we're at in this process is everything is due from a narrative perspective on the 26th of January. So we're hoping to have the bulk of our narratives done middle of next week, really kind of shooting for the 20th as our cutoff. And we're getting some cost estimates, some updated energy savings, and just kind of putting together all those details. And then we'll work with Robert and his staff as they've kind of started that process of filling out the beautiful federal government documentation process, which is probably more of a marathon than a sprint, as I think Robert put it earlier. And it's a lot of paperwork and paper handling, but we have a grant writer on staff who's gotten on calls with us, walked us through kind of his thoughts based upon the scope, as well as based upon the grants that are available. So this is one avenue that we're kind of diving into and looking to help support. Now, in addition to that, is if we get the grant, it doesn't preclude us from looking at the incentives that were just put out by Evergy and Ameren kind of simultaneously. So that allows us to also go after the same rebates and energy efficiency credits on the back end of the project. But really what we're trying to see is, hey, from a capital upfront perspective, can we get these dollars from the federal government? From a scope, Drew's kind of put together kind of a quick write-up, but I'll have him just talk a little bit about where the areas of focus are, and then we'll kind of close and kind of hand it off back to Robert and let Lachlan kind of take over and do their presentation.
Yeah, and just to very quickly cover the 3 main categories, we are focusing on HVAC specifically for Bodie Middle School Gymnasium. Very similar to a lot of the projects that we took on in the Phase 2 ESSER project, where it was focused on large spaces that don't have cooling today. The secondary aspect of that, just like that phase of work, was that because they don't have cooling, they're not introducing any outside air. So we're hoping that focusing on that aspect of poor humidity control, no outside air and no cooling impacting the learning environment, we're really hoping that that can help us stand out in terms of the application. So that's going to be the focus at Bodie Middle School. I think in a perfect world, we'd like to address the entire HVAC system. And Peter didn't allude to it, but it's covered in the grant program section of this report, but there's kind of a $500K to $15 million maybe sweet spot. We're thinking, and we've been told maybe $3 million is the ideal kind of grant application size.
Basically, we're told don't get too greedy, but don't leave anything on the table, which is like, well, what does that mean? You know, it's from a grant writer perspective, I'm like, that sounds great in theory, but 500,000 to 15 million can be perceived either way, depending on the size of the district and who it is that's applying. So interesting conversations, and obviously there's going to be a lot of competition for this. Not to take over from Drew, but one of the things that we've talked about is there's 5 phases. So if we don't get on this phase, don't get discouraged. If anything, let's use that as the learning kind of piece for, well, let's reapply and get prepared for reapplying next year. And let's use all of those who won grants in this first cycle as kind of our baseline to justify the work that we want to put forth. It might still be Bodie, but it might not be lighting. It might be lighting, but it might not be Bodie. So kind of as we're working through this with you as your partner, you know, we want to make sure that you understand that this is a 5-time opportunity for us to go after. Hopefully we get on the first round and then we can continue and get more of the second, the third, and the fourth. But it is going to be competitive, and I think if anything else, we can learn if we do not get it in this first round. Well, what was a success for that individual, or what was a district of similar size, you know, in Savannah, Georgia, that all of a sudden got a $4 million opportunity? What was the winning characteristics of that grant proposal from a scopes perspective? And so we'll use that here over the next few years and kind of push our message in the right way based upon who we see win, and hopefully we are one of those winners. But I just want to set the expectation, if you've ever gone after a federal grant, they are not guaranteed ever, but you know, we certainly hope that we can put our best foot forward here in this first round and continuing on as well.
Part of the application asks for it to be scalable and repeatable, and so the next couple of scope items I want to talk about kind of have that aspect to it. One specifically at the Bodie Middle School is we've already implemented the same control system, automated controls, thermostatic controls for 10 facilities within your portfolio today. And so this would continue that same path forward. Hopefully that can kind of help us stand out. But additionally, on the back of this handout, we cover LED lighting, which we implemented at 4 facilities as part of the phase 1 opportunity. And so continuing on with retrofit kits, LED retrofit kits, dimming capabilities, occupancy control, kind of continuing that path forward. We're hoping that they would consider that at all 3 high schools and kind of replicate what was done on those first phases. The last one, I think we're kind of, to Peter's point, we don't want to leave anything on the table, but this, in terms of solar PV, you all have done a really remarkable job in the past on implementing that at several of your facilities. We've targeted 2 more at Hosea and Hilliard, where maybe it makes sense to include solar as part of this grant application. But with IRA funding where it stands today and the heavy discount that the federal government's providing there, maybe it makes more sense to pursue those on their own.
Yeah, and just to explain that, so there is another funding opportunity from the federal government through the Inflation Reduction Act. It's the IRA that allows for a 30% buy down, excuse me, a 30 to 60% buy down on upfront cost for solar PV photovoltaic installations. So what we're running is the numbers of these 2 sites in particular. Does it make sense to look at that as kind of a subset and do that as a separate, you know, individual approach, and then use the buy down, and does that give you a better alternative? Because you still have to then pay for the improvements. So those are the things we're kind of working through over the next week and a half or so. I know it sounds like a lot of work to do, but
And I will tell you, part of the reason we're looking at those 2 sites, we're really looking more at the ground mounted.
Yep.
Those 2 sites have a lot of space that would be available to do some ground mount solar, and on the backside, it would be less area that our maintenance people have to mow as well. So there's a little bit of an offset there too. So
Yeah, and that's going to be conflictual with what you see in the pictures. Those are obviously roof mount systems. We analyzed both ground mount and roof mount, which produce different costs, but simultaneously those higher costs are often offset with higher savings when you do the ground mount system. So it's we'll kind of weigh both options, and I think kind of propose whichever one makes more sense, and go from there.
I kind of want to throw that out in case anybody asks, well, why did you pick those 2 sites? That was how they kind of got picked, as we were initially was talking about places that would maybe be a good fit. And it may not be, we may not go to a ground mount, but that was something that those 2 spaces would allow that availability.
So that kind of gives you a quick rundown of the scope, and kind of to understand that the 26th is again the deadline to have everything turned in. We're planning on actually submitting in the portal on the 24th. Again, if you've ever used the federal government's portal, you wait until the 26th. Good luck even logging in at some point in time. So we're hoping to have everything completed again by the end of next week, and then we'll upload here the week following, give everybody kind of a weekend to look through and talk through if there's any questions. Now, what that will entail is we're still not actually potentially being awarded anything. If you look at that final back-end grant application process, that narrative then turns into a full-blown application that we get to turn in on April the 21st. So it's a 2-phase process what we understand, talking with our grant writer and his kind of contacts within the DOE and the conversations that have been had, it's twofold. It's one is to see how much interest is there really in these types of programs. You know, is it gonna be 100 schools that apply, or is it gonna be 25,000 schools that apply? I guess it's gonna be somewhere in between, obviously, but I'm gonna lean it's gonna be quite a few from a district perspective that are saying, hey, those ESSER monies that we got over the past 3 or 4 years, or 2 or 3 years, they were great, but man, that just fed our appetite to go look for things that we know we need to help achieve within our schools from an infrastructure perspective. So that'll be a good tell as far as how many they anticipate having. And then that 21st will be really when we continue this application process. So you might be hearing from us again between now and then, but we'll hopefully have an update for you shortly after that we turn things in as far as number of applicants and whether we come up and present or we just share that information with the group. We'll kind of disseminate that, or let Robert kind of disseminate that information to you all. But again, I think it's a great opportunity. There's no guarantee, so I don't want to sit here and say the money's in the bag yet, but it certainly is a great opportunity for us to continue to look at ways to improve infrastructure, improve the learning environments for students, and hopefully do this in a way that's as low as cost as we possibly can. There is a 5% match grant, but you know, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, getting $3 million for a 5% match, it's a pretty good investment as far as your return on the scopes of work that you'd be seeing in implementation. So, any questions that you have?
I have 3 questions. When you talked about grants and rebates, would that come back to the district, or does that go to you?
Well, it's the grants from a construction perspective. It goes through the district and you would pay us for the work. And the rebates are the exact same way, just like we've done all the other projects. We help to apply for those through Evergy, and then that application, you guys get the funding back towards, however you want to put it, towards the project, other projects, however kind of the district decides to use it.
On the benefits of the ground versus the roof mounts, I know, at least from a residential standpoint, we've had people, mowers throw rocks and breaks the ground mounts, vandalisms, you have a higher chance of vandalism on the ground mounts versus the roof mounts.
Yeah.
Are those all things you're gonna kind of put together and
Oh yeah, I mean, and
cost
that's
insurance?
kind of the beauty of this narrative piece before we have to do the full application. You know, we're not rushing to this January 26th deadline with, you know, every answer to every question
Sure.
from a federal government perspective. What we're anticipating is as they start to ask questions about the applications that have come in, those are the kind of things that we can then work with the district on to say, hey, to your point,
Pros and cons.
you know, it's yes, we're gonna get rid of the mowers, but for a certain aspect, but then on the same side of things, does that open us up for vandals or,
Right.
you know, no student would ever do
That's
that.
the thing, we would have to do some security of those,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
some fencing
Oh,
and
of
things like
course,
that,
yeah.
absolutely. yeah.
And then my last question is, for Bodie, is this the 2-pipe or the 4-pipe?
Well, so Bodie, we're looking at the whole building now, just so that we can get a sense of what that's gonna look like in the future. But for this application, we're really focused on just the gymnasium. So right now, those are being served, I think through just,
So today it's got a steam or a hot water boiler that serves just the gymnasium itself. The rest of the building is separate. But I think the best pursuit of a solution there would be very similar to how we did the high schools, where we took on the large spaces like gyms and auditoriums as standalone package systems that you can turn on in the middle of summer for camps or whatever in the gym, and then later, when we can get that type of funding, make it a 4-pipe system, hot water, chill water, that serves the rest of those classroom spaces.
Okay.
Just kind of, again, make it a very replicable process of repeating what we think was successful at those high schools.
Okay.
and that's one of the questions, or one of the things we've been talking with, you know, Mickey about and Casey is, okay, moving forward, and they're on board, 4-pipe, let's make it reputable, let's make it something that every staff member who we bring on board, or every person who's currently here, they're not having to learn 12 different
I
systems.
agree. That's good.
Yeah, maintain the same system across 20 buildings is a lot easier than maintaining 19 systems across 20 buildings. It's a nightmare, so.
Awesome. That's all I had.
Questions?
Quick question, when would we know if we were awarded the grant? What's the timeline?
Oh man, the federal government. I'd love to tell you summertime, but this application was supposed to come out in the spring of last year, and it came out in November. So if you're looking at that as far as how quickly they were acting to just get it out, I would be guessing before the end of the year, we should have some kind of an answer or a response. The other thing, though, that we've also kind of pushed, there was an RFI that came out a while back in relation to this, the summer of last year. You know, our notes in there, and as an industry and as a company, were, you know, you can't give and award something in spring, or tell somebody to get something in spring, or apply for something, excuse me, in the spring, but then can't award it until December with inflation. Because they don't quite understand that, you know, $3 million in the springtime might be $3.4 million the year after when you start to go to construction? And how is anybody supposed to be able to allocate that if what they're truly waiting on is this grant information? So we'll see if that changes the speed of anything, but I can't necessarily give you a straight. We can for sure wait the summer, but I'm hoping we can find something soon. So.
Couple of questions. So is this an all or nothing scenario, or if we apply for a grant, would they say we won't give you 5 million, but we'll give you 3?
Yeah, it's the grant itself is whether you are awarded or not. It's not a breakdown of individual scopes or individual buildings. It's truly tell us what you're going to do with $1 million or 3 million, whatever you apply for. That's and that's kind of the other beauty of having what we're anticipating being 5 rounds. We can learn a lot from this initial round to understand what were the winning scopes or what were the winning projects, and then how do we then take that on to 2023 to 2024, 2024 to 2025 in terms of their cycles.
And then, so just for clarification, the 5%, if they award us, let's say $100,000, we would have to come up with the
5%, yeah.
So, okay. Did we ever fix that air conditioner on the top floor of Bodie? Was that in the last phase, or did we skip that?
Mhm.
We've not had any scope yet.
We haven't had any scope at Bodie.
We've never had a scope of voting.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the reasons we are going to this gym space, because it's our last gym space that is an air conditioning.
That's what I was gonna ask, are the other middle schools air conditioned?
Yeah, yeah. They all have an air conditioned gym space available to them, so.
And actually,
wonder if we
Spring
could-
Garden and Riverview are both on the RV whatever system, so they're fully, and then Truman's not fully though, is it?
Well,
Does it have some-
Truman has Keatley, so,
But doesn't it have some window air conditioners? and
yeah,
stuff?
Truman's not air conditioned, it's the whole building, yeah, that's correct.
What part of it's not air conditioned?
Truman has window units.
Okay.
I think the library maybe is air conditioned, I believe that end of the building maybe, don't quote me on that, but I feel like
Sounds
that
right.
end of the building is air conditioned, kind of that addition down there. But classrooms, they still have window units over there.
And that'd probably be a whole separate project to fix that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I wonder what the cost would be for that.
Well, that probably would be one of the next things as we.
We have a meeting after this to go talk to Mickey about some things. I think Truman is on his list of conversation pieces, so.
Kind of starting to get some ballparks on
Yeah.
the last few spaces we have left.
Yeah, I never forget that day I was up there. It was really hot.
I pulled a few kids out of third floor classrooms at Central over the years, so yes, those third floors can get warm, definitely. All right, anything
So
else?
other than 5%, that would be the only cost that we'd be out of pocket?
Yeah, for this grant, it's a 5%, well, the 5% match is what they call it. so.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
Anything else for these?
Yes, I've got several things I just wanna be clear about is all. Who's eligible for this?
It's any, what they call like a learning LEA or something, basically any school district across the country.
Across the
It's a
country?
national grant.
Okay, so it's not just Missouri then, okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. So that means, we don't know, I heard you say that we don't know how many's gonna compete until after everybody's turned in.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's, so kind of how we've done it, like in our Midwest team, is we've kind of worked with one specific client in each state. So Drew and I are working with St. Joe, and then we've got Shawnee Heights in Kansas is the other one that we're working with. So I'm not trying to saturate as much as I can, the pool of applicants. I'd like, the people we've done a lot of good work with and the good partners that we have to be the ones who, we're paying the most attention to, I guess is how I'd phrase it, compared to others, so.
At this point, well, how did you guys, you have all been working together and stuff, Mickey and those guys, but, so, all you guys kind of deciding that this is where this grant application money should go to these particular,
So what we really looked at was based upon the criteria of the grant. We started to break down all the information we had on the district, which if you remember, 2018, 19-ish, we did a kind of an overview capital plan of every building within the district. And part of that conversation was, things like lighting, things like mechanical and electrical needs across each building. And so when we started to break it down and the conversation came up about Bodie, the heat and the experience of students inside that space, We said, well, okay, what is that gonna look like? Is that a good applicant for this particular grant? And then we started to look at the lighting at Central, at the 3 high schools, Central Lafayette and Benton, and said, okay, another opportunity for us to get savings. And then based upon the grant language, there's gonna be heavy emphasis on efficiencies and renewables. So adding in the solar piece makes the grant that much more attractive. And again, it's a best case scenario until we honestly see how they and what the criteria is that they, as the federal government, break down these grants and provide, dollars to real districts here over the next, 6 to 8 months or so.
And we have other buildings that are identified as needing lighting upgrades, things
Yeah.
like that, but we felt like, hey, this might make sense to chunk out the 3 high schools with this grant possibility here.
Okay, so that's what I thought that's what you guys have been doing for the last couple of years, was going ahead and particularly lighting, I thought was one of the big savings. So Lafayette, the high schools haven't had the updated lighting
It's a mix,
system.
yeah, good question, Kenny. So the maintenance staff has done a good job of proactively replacing, for the most part, it has been LED tubes. So in a fixture like this with a prismatic lens, you just open it up, you put in new tubes and be done with it. A lot of those have occurred over many years, so as the technology has advanced, Mickey and his staff could have been starting with 18-watt tubes or 16-watt tubes, and now we're down to 9 and 9.5-watt tubes. But what we implemented at Carden Park and Oak Grove was an aesthetic upgrade as well, going with retrofit kits where it's kind of a direct and indirect light. It looks really aesthetically pleasing, but also allows that functionality for dimming control and for occupancy control too. So when people vacate a classroom and nobody's in there, it turns them off automatically, removes the human error from that, but also allows teachers on a day like this where you've got good ambient light, you can dim it down, get additional savings, and get the light levels to the levels that they need for projectors or TVs or whatever the task is that they're performing. So it's more than just a simple LED upgrade, it's kind of transformational classroom learning environment upgrade.
So I guess these upgrades that you guys have been working on is more like motors and air conditioners, HVAC and stuff like that, because the lighting's just been on an ongoing basis.
The lighting's kind of been as, like, phase 1 had a lot of lighting, but phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, whatever phase it is now, but phase 2 and 3, I guess, and 4, were all mechanically laden, focused on getting the air conditioning added to or replacing old HVAC equipment, like Hilliard or where it might be at the high schools as well, to get the air conditioning in those spaces as well. But we haven't been doing lighting as a part of those.
Oh, sure. And I wanted to see, had you guys decided where the installation of the solar would be, if we?
Yeah, there's 2 options. I mean, we've got those 2 spaces there, in terms of, you see the pictures, I don't know on which page you're on, but on the back side there.
Yeah.
It's got the pictures that are roof mounted, and then Robert obviously made some opportunities to look at a ground mounted system. Really, I think what we're trying to figure out is, from January when we apply to when we have to give the final application in April, what's gonna make the most sense? And there's a lot of things to weigh within that. One is obviously the cost of ground versus roof mounted. Then the other is safety, security, and then does that really benefit to have it on the ground versus on the roof? So those are the kind of things we have to weigh and then have that discussion. We're just really trying to get, in about a month's worth of time, a lot of engineering, a lot of focus on what do the scopes even look like, so in that narrative, when we send it in here in a week or 2, that the federal government understands exactly what we're trying to accomplish as a whole. We don't have to have, this is the inverter we're using, these are the panels we're using. We have to have, what's the value for you as a district? What is the value financially in savings? What's the value in financially from a cost perspective? And then what does that look like for the benefit of the whole for the students who are attending, Central or Lafayette or Benton or Bodie, or go down the list in terms of the buildings that are included? And how does that overall impact your district? And that's really what we're driving for the 26th. And that's kind of what the narrative will include. And that's kind of what the focus of that initial, phase 1 of this grant application process is asking for. It's not the technical details in terms of nuts and bolts. It's more, give me the 30,000-foot technical details, and then we'll start to ask you to narrow those down as we go to that April deadline of the 21st that you'll see here in that bottom on the back side of the page.
How much space will this occupy, Bodie, for ground mount?
And the Solar proposal.
over solar.
For
Posey and Hilliard.
Posey and Hilliard, I'm sorry.
Just Hosey and Hilliard?
Yeah, Bodie is the HVAC in the gymnasium.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's
No, really?
probably 30 to 50 panels, depending on the facility. And it would be, you know, when you're working on a roof, you have to work around roof-mounted equipment. When you're working in a field, you can be more strategic on how you can cluster them. And then like we discussed earlier, you want to fence it off, to make sure it's secure.
Yeah, I was unaware of that. The only reason I was asking for Bodie, I know there's not a lot of land space there.
No. Yeah,
But that's a consideration of the other ones too,
definitely.
land usage. Okay.
Well, I'm glad Bodie's last, because, you know, it is only a 135-year-old building, an old monastery, so. And you know, the talk recently has been if we're gonna build something new, it would be a middle school type situation, so. But that's where you're down the years, so whatever we put in the Bodie, I guess is, might get back on resale, so. Thanks very much, you guys, for keeping us abreast of this and banging away. Was it 80 million, or 800 million, or 8 billion? What was the number that's coming out?
I wish it was the last one that you said, 80,
Right, me too.
but it's 80 in this cycle.
80 million is all?
80 million, it's 500 million in total over the next, I guess, 3 or 4 years, so.
And we're competing against everybody?
Competing against everybody.
Hey, I play a little lottery every day too.
Yeah, hey, it's 1.35 billion, Kenny, think what you could do with that.
Can you build this?
It's right in
You could build a new high school, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks, guys, appreciate it. I'm gonna let these guys take off, so
Yeah.
they can go meet with Mickey now.
Yeah,
so.
thank you guys.
Great, thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Next on our list, Matt Tritz and Jess Rigsby are here from Lockton today. I'll try not to shoot the remote right through Matt there. But they're gonna share a little information about where we're at with our health insurance, kind of where, how things went for our last year, and then kind of how things are trending this year, so. Without that, I think Jess is probably the one that's gonna do the talking, or are you doing the talking?
You don't want me to.
I have no dog in this fight, so.
You don't want me to. Thanks for the introduction, Robert.
Let me get
Thanks
you up
for,
on the screen here too.
Inviting us to the meeting. While he's getting that up on the screen, like you said, my name is Matt Trotz with Lockton, Senior Vice President, and we've had privilege of working with the district for 3 or 4 years now on your employee benefits, your health insurance programs, and anything that you would call an employee benefit. So thanks for the time today. I'll let Jess introduce herself in just a second, but really the agenda, what we're going to do today is talk about your upcoming renewal, which is in July, give you a little bit of snapshot about how your plan's running. You have a self-funded plan, so you guys are taking the risk, and we can buy some reinsurance. So we'll give you an idea on how the plan is running and initial forecast, like a claim forecast on what we're thinking about. And then just a quick review of the current options you have, what employees have when they enroll in Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's 3 options, so we'll go over that real quick. So Jess will handle all the tough stuff, and if there's any questions about general market, overview, things like that, I'm here to support her with that kind of stuff. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jess.
Hi, I'm Jess Rigsby. I have been with Lockton for about 3 years now, so kind of with the start of St. Joe coming over to Lockton, going along for the ride with everything, and I'm an account manager with Lockton as well. So just kind of, as Matt had said, we're kind of going to look over what's coming up in the pipeline as far as what we're going to be tackling on the plan start in July with the benefits. And you can go, the next one is good.
Yeah.
Maybe one more?
One more?
Yeah, perfect. This page right down here breaks down all the benefits that we have and that we help with during the years. Coming up right now, every year we have Blue KC and your Optum comes up for renewal. That's something that we should be receiving any day now, and we'll kind of go over later. We're not expecting a lot from this year. You can see some of the claims that we have in the projection in a couple slides that are just kind of looking at maybe our budgets, the budget for you guys just kind of staying neutral, no increase or decrease to it. The plan has been running really well this year so far. Then we also have our stop loss, which is your reinsurance, so if we have any outstanding crazy claims, we, like we did last year, we'll go in and market that as well. We've got a couple more that are just under rate guarantee, so we have a couple years before we need to go and kind of negotiate with them. And then we have your COBRA retiree with task is coming up. That usually is pretty neutral. And then we are working right now on the employee assistant program through New Directions. Something we are getting responses, I think any day now they're due, and so we'll bring that over to everyone and kind of go through who's gonna be the best option as far as financially, who's got the best provider to help with the employees when they're calling in, best technology, all of that is what we evaluate. I guess, yeah. This is just a timeline, kind of over the next 6 months of what we're expecting to do. Right now, we're also looking at the enrollment system that the employees will use. We're kind of evaluating if TBX is gonna be the best one for us moving forward and St. Joe moving forward. So we're looking at that. Decision should be made any day now. Then just, we put on there the board meetings where we're going to bring the renewals when we get them, go over some of the results we had with the TBX and then also with the EAP marketing, and just going through like adding open enrollment on there and when we'd expect some other renewals. So just a snapshot of the next 6 months. This is what we were talking about earlier, looking at kind of how your claims are going and projecting into the next year for 23 and 24. So we use this with Locked In to anticipate and negotiate honestly with Blue Cross as well, to kind of say, hey, this is what we're seeing with inflation, with trend. This is what we really should be expecting versus what they're giving us. A little bit of a surplus right there, 61,000. About 62,000. Variance is 0.4 negative. Negatives don't happen very often in the renewal world or insurance world, so just kind of staying at flat is what we're anticipating. It's very early on. I will caveat with this. So that kind of, it's only through October is the claims that we have right now, but we reevaluate as the year comes. We're getting ready to with January's data when we receive that in December to kind of reevaluate. So far, looking at the plan, it's kind of staying pretty steady with everything.
So you're saying that Blue Cross probably won't lower our rates?
I wish.
But we may stay at the same though, which
Yeah.
is probably the best news.
So Robert,
Exactly.
do you have the insurance committee after this?
Yeah, I guess.
So he can actually make the same promise I did last year when I wasn't supposed to?
We might slow them down.
I haven't made any promises about anything.
I did last year, I promised him no increase and we
So this
discussed it
page,
yet.
given the finance committee, I don't want to blow by this too fast. You know, just generally speaking, your self-funded plan, won't be exact, but 80% of your costs or so are claims, right? Not necessarily Blue Cross pricing, it's the claims, and we pay an admin fee to Blue Cross for them to actually administer the claims, so that's a very small percentage. We pay reinsurance, you know, for high-cost claims, so that's another small percentage of the total. So all those things are on here. And I would just, down at the bottom, it's got current funding rates, says 971.19. So just kind of a, where are we at kind of in the world compared to others? I try to look at what we call them per employee per year, right? So if you just took that number times 12, you guys are under 12,000 a year, which is it's within benchmark, right? So I would just say it's an average costing plan when we compare you to other districts that are like you and other public entities that are like you. So we don't, at the moment, you know, I knock on wood because it's insurance and you never know what claims are going to happen, but right now I'd say the plan from a cost perspective is in line with the benchmark. Not that the benchmark's good, because I do know this is expensive, but we don't see big problems here.
May I ask what the HSA seating is? It's $1 million
You want to take
for
that one, Jess?
Yeah, that's gonna be what the district is going to put into the HSA accounts if you happen to have the high deductible health plan.
So health savings accounts, we got a lot of acronyms in insurance.
Right.
Too many.
So HSA stands for,
seating, I didn't understand.
Yeah, the district provides money
You gotta throw $1.4 million into prime the pump.
into.
So this is what happens, Kenny, so
Yeah.
you as a Board of Education, you agreed to pay $790 a month, and I'm just using these numbers facetiously, okay? So that $790 goes towards each plan, it goes towards the PPO, it goes towards the EPO, and it goes towards the HSA. The HSA cost is only $550 a month to the district, so what happens is, to get to that $790, you give each one of those employees that sign up for the HSA $240 or to the maximum amount of $3,600, right? You can't have any more than $3,600 per year.
Yeah, right now, they can do $99.85.
So I have an HSA personally, and so I get $240 a month from the school district. And it actually, it's a very consumer-driven plan, and since we have been with Lockton, we probably had 4 or 5% of our employees on that plan, and now we're well over 50%. And that's the
46.
reason, 46?
Yeah.
And that's the reason why our plan is running the way that it is, because it's consumer driven now. It used to be, everybody, when they had a runny nose, they would go to the emergency room. Well, on HSA, you can't go to the emergency room. But on the other plan, you can. And so it's forcing people to be better stewards of their own money, to be honest with you, but it's also helping our plan. It's driving the success of our plan.
And it's helping us educate people on where's the appropriate place to go. You know, should you go to urgent care, should you go to ER, you know? And so the ER is what eats up everybody's medical costs. I mean, if somebody should go to the urgent care instead of the ER, and we can help them know when the right time to go to urgent care instead of the ER is, that just benefits us, it benefits us in a big way. So I think we've done a better job of helping educate our employees too.
And when you say your 248 or whatever that is, this is a hypothetical number, but is it literally a credit back to you somehow, or is it just?
It's the difference between what the district pays for the other plans and what they pay for that high deductible plan.
Okay.
So it comes out exactly the same, yeah.
And so it goes on a little card, and what I can do is I can go to Walgreens anytime I need medicine, and I can put it on that card. It's just
But you take more risk.
I take a lot more risk.
Yeah,
Yes.
your
Because I can't,
deductibles
you know
are-
why I take a lot more risk? It's because I can't stand insurance.
Yeah.
I think it's a crooked business, and so I take all the risk I can with everything I have.
So just for clarity, we are not an insurance
No, it's a
company.
Ponzi.
But just for clarity, it's not called the group.
It's a Ponzi scheme for sure. It's a Ponzi scheme. I mean, it's a
I shouldn't have said that, my fault.
See that, you represent private industry as well, correct?
Yes.
What's the comparison, similar program in a private entity versus in a school district?
Yeah.
I mean, $12,000 per year, is it 10, is it 15, is it?
Great question. Yeah, and I mean, so I say that because typically school districts like to be compared to school districts, right? Law firms like to be compared with law firms. Manufacturing facilities like to be compared with manufacturing facilities. The type of employee demographics and those are all a little bit different. I would say for school districts, you're below. Typically, it's higher because kind of to the health savings account question, right? So this type strategy, which is implemented by the government, it's actually called a qualified high deductible health plan, which is what somebody has to enroll in order to be eligible for that health savings account. School districts haven't adopted that as fast as private industry, right? So if we just took the whole big ball of employer-sponsored health insurance, half the employers offer a qualified high deductible plan with an HSA, half of them don't. And I would say, school districts, that percentage is gonna be less. They're more like PPO plans. Typically, that's what we see is just basic PPO plans. So I would say this strategy has been, from a school district perspective, I wouldn't say dramatically like progressive, but a little bit, right? A little bit progressive in a way to contain costs. And to your point, like we see PEPYs, and the last couple of years have been very difficult, like from a normalcy underwriting, just because of COVID and the pandemic. Like it caused all sorts of anomalies, and like when we look back 12 months, if you think about the pandemic, like that really had an impact on healthcare both ways. But trends are going up. We're seeing costs 15, 16,000 PEPY in private sector. On the high end, like really bad ones, I see some that are 20. I rarely see any, 8, 9, so I think you guys are in a pretty good spot. Yeah.
And you partially answered the question I was gonna ask, dealing with the projection of incurred claims. How did the pandemic impact the number of claims that were filed? And I would assume that it went up, you said it was kind of up and down.
Both ways. So what we saw during the pandemic was a decrease because access to services was not available. A lot of hospitals, you couldn't get in.
Can get in for a lot of
They were
elective stuff,
closed,
or
right? So
colonoscopies, or things like that even, so.
elective things you couldn't get in. So for a while, we saw really a sharp downturn in claims. And then what it created was some, I'll use the term pent-up demand, or people didn't take care of themselves during that period of time that, like they may have needed to. So during calendar year 2021, I've been doing this 20 years, and the cost increases just because 20 was so low were, really high, like self-funded. You guys didn't have this, fortunately, but across the board, we'd see 30%, 25, 30% on a self-funded plan in 1 year, which was hard. So we tended to kind of blend that out over a couple of years and look at 19 versus 20 versus 21. And if you did it that way, you could kind of see like, well, a little bit closer to trend. But specific claims related to the diagnosis of COVID, it did have an impact, right? People went in, some people were sicker than others, not necessarily for the vaccinations, right? Those are covered by the government, but for the actual care of somebody that was really sick because of COVID. I don't have that number from your plan right here. I know we've reported it, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it did go up.
Yeah, but like you're saying, the other areas kind of evened it out with lack of claims there. Because you would expect it to be trending down in the number of claims, but not necessarily.
Yeah, and what we're seeing right now is the unit cost of services in the market is going up. Hospitals are asking for more money. So, it's not necessarily a number of services or trips to the outpatient procedure. It is what the actual, the cost, what they're trying to get from the insurance companies to pay for these services. That unit cost is projected trends for the next couple of years. While this looks good right now, we've got some tough sledding ahead of us from just medical and prescription drug and trend.
And I think, Dennis, kind of to what you were saying, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, educators are not typically a very healthy group. In fact, they're not a good insurance group because they're not healthy, they're fairly sedentary. They have a lot of babies because we have a lot of people in that age range that are having babies. And so, as a group, educators are not really super attractive to insurance companies. Or they're attractive if they can get the premium where they want, but,
Yeah, I mean, for you guys, it's your claims, like you're taking the risk on the claims. The insurance we're buying is the stop loss.
Right.
The high cost claims. And then, we shop it. We go to 15 or so reinsurance carriers every year to get the best that we can for y'all.
But in the education circle, we're probably we're one that an insurance company wants because we have our balance where it needs to be from the number of people on HSAs now, compared to what it was.
I'll share those. I'll share that where we're at on healthcare trust once we get done. I can't pull it up because I've got this.
I asked the question just because I think it's important for the public to understand what kind of benefits are being provided, so they know that, hey, we're spending all this money and people working in our education system are getting this gold standard benefit that they can't get. That perception might not be great, but this is a pretty reasonable plan with, they can take some risk, so I like the options. It's good use of dollars.
I got classification I want to ask about, but I'm still stuck on this situation with you, which now we've got 50% of our people on. That credit, so to speak, so that you have a high deductible, that when you have to exercise it, then you can use out of this savings account.
Yes, absolutely.
Plus, if there's other things, take it and go to the pharmacy and stuff like that, right? Okay, and then, thanks, I'm clear on that now. But the other thing, and I think you addressed it slightly, and you just addressed it again, about the stop loss cost What was the reason, do you think we're gonna have a big increase in that this year?
Well, it's too early to tell, right?
Okay.
So that number up there says 25%.
Right.
And that's conservative. The stop loss market is what we'll call a hard market. You know, so there's not a lot of reinsurance companies out there trying to buy business. So if we go send out a bid on your behalf to 10 reinsurance companies, you know, what we're gonna see is, like anything else, right? You see some grouping, but you don't see reinsurance companies like taking a big chance because this stuff's so expensive with cost of services, cost of prescription drugs. Like right now, a reinsurance company, if you have seen anything about new drugs coming out, like there's a new specialty drug for hemophilia, right, that cures it. Right now, somebody's hemophilia, it's about $1 million a year in cost, right? So you'd be covered by that, but they're on the hook. But there's another drug, you know, that just the one drug is like a $2 million drug. So, you know, nobody's real aggressive about taking big chances on this. 25% is a little conservative, but right now at this stage of the game, we'd rather show you a conservative number than try to tell you.
And that's why we have to carry that stop
You're
loss
gonna get a
insurance.
zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that it's gonna be a 25. That's kind of a plug number for right now, just because we don't market that until
Are you
March.
conservative high or conservative low on your estimate?
Hi.
High. Okay. You know, just last year, we marketed this and it moved, and I think it was north of 30% savings, right? You were with Blue KC for a long time, and we moved it. So we'll see how that works.
We stayed pretty aggressive on that last year. You know, I mean, we were on them pretty hard.
Yeah.
We probably had the best cards in that game. I don't know that we're gonna have the best cards in the game this year.
Yeah.
And why was that, Gabe?
It's just that where we were at, we were positioned with Blue Cross for them to help us out, because we said if you don't, then we're gonna pull out and
I should.
bid the business.
Yeah. So yeah, good question. I don't know, if I had a crystal ball, I'd tell you exactly what it is, but we've got more months to go. And like you would expect, if it was your risk, you would want to get all the data you could before you offer a price. So they're gonna wait until probably March.
But we want that expenditure because that is protecting us from big lost claims, right?
You gotta have it.
Right, it's 300,000 right now, right? Yeah.
203.
What, anything over that they pay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you gotta have it.
so the $1 million was paid out as a premium towards those reinsurers, right?
Yes.
So, was there any idea how much that saved us?
So, yeah, we track loss ratio. I don't know if you have that information.
We just had 7 employees over that stop loss.
So buying that extra reinsurance paid off big time.
Well, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, well, that's insurance. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You know,
Okay.
Sometimes you pay more premium than they pay out in claims.
Right.
Other years, you know, they lose.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're transferring those high costs. It costs the district $1 million to do that, but you gotta have it.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
7 of them over 300,000 or 200,000.
We'll look that
Were
up.
there any $1 million claims?
Last year, we had one that was 650. That was the largest one, and that was, if I remember right, like double what the second one was. So that was a pretty drastic one.
Yeah, sure.
The other ones were just barely over, so there wasn't a lot.
Without the reinsurance in, Gabe, we would have had to take that money out of our fund, right?
Right.
With our self-insurance fund.
Right.
That dwindled pretty fast.
So it would have been a couple $1 million last year, right?
Yeah, it was like 1.3.
Okay. Okay, well, when you said what the figures are in that fund, though, that's really a small percentage though of what we got in the fund right now, isn't it?
I'll pull that, but
Okay.
I think we're like 5.3 at the end of the last month.
5.3 million?
And that 1.3 is really only for those large claimants, those 10 that were over, that we were tracking at a certain point. So you still have your other claims from just every day that you would have to add on top of that
That the
too.
reinsurance guys pick up?
No, not that they pick up, just going like that you would have to pay, say if they didn't pick up that, kind of going along with
I
it.
see.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks.
Talk about current plan offerings.
Kind of like a little kid after.
This we just just wanted to bring a snapshot of how the plans are laid out right now. You can see, we talked about the qualified high deductible there on the right. So you've got the deductibles laid out in between, and these are gonna be all in-network as well. I just didn't put the out-of-network on there right now. And then you've got your EPO and then your PPO, just kind of taking a snapshot of, you can see how the consumer-driven is on that health deductible versus the PPO and EPO.
And something we've talked a little bit about, and just, I'm floating it out there, I don't think we're looking at any changes right now for next year, but probably something that we need to at least keep in mind is right now, the PPO and the high deductible one, we're in really good shape with those, but those two are subsidizing the EPO. At the end of November, I think the EPO was running at 105%, where the PPO and the high deductible ones both running like 77, 76%.
Claim ratio?
Yes. So those two are subsidizing that one. It may be a discussion at some point, we may have to say, hey, if we want to continue to have that, the people who want to have that may have to pay more for it. I think we're okay right now because those other two are running very, very healthy right now, and as long as we continue that. But I don't anticipate us making a change in that this year, but at least I want to float that out there that, hey, because if we do decide to do that, we want to give people plenty of time, lead time to start thinking about before they would go into open enrollment, how they want to think about that. So just wanted to put that out there a little bit. Anything else there?
No, but that's, yeah. These next couple slides kind of back up kind of what Robert was saying. Just a breakdown of what the premiums are as far as employees are paying right now. So you can see that EPO is a little, more expensive than the other two, but less people in that one. More people, you can see that, 49%, was it 46%? 46% there in that deductible health plan, so.
What's the total number of eligible people that can take insurance? This comes to 1,329 enrolled.
What was
How
our
many
last?
full-time eligibles you have?
14.
You'd ask that number right now.
I'm just curious if you've got 1,329 out of 1,400 taking it, obviously people enjoy this because they're not going to a spouse's plan or
Right.
something else. This is
Right.
obviously a good plan.
It's in the 15s.
Okay.
Total eligibles in the 15s.
They've got a pretty good take-up rate.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Anytime you have more than 75% take up, you're good, 75, 80%.
There's not too many jobs around that would have a better plan than this for their employees.
And just the next slide is year over year, a breakdown per plan, so you can see how much it is per employee, per month, costing each plan. As you can see, like we talked about the COVID, it was down in COVID and then went up kind of, I guess.
I think that kind
Trying to
of goes to
make
Matt's
up.
point about really with those years, you almost have to do some smoothing to really figure out trends because those 2 years are such weird anomalies. But we're trending good right now.
Yeah, we don't have to, these last two ones, this is just what happened last year, just a refresher of it. We marketed pretty much everything across the board and moved from MetLife for most of the lines of coverage. A little bit of a snapshot on Blue KC and what happened there. And then adding, we added the identity theft this year as well. And that is where we are kind of comparing year over year, where you are from July through October with we had our claims.
And you can see our claims funding ratio, we're running pretty healthy there, so. That's it.
Good stuff.
Any more questions?
Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna pull this up real quick. Since I told you I would share the healthcare trust numbers with you all. At the beginning of We started out at 5,271,000 and some change at the beginning of December. At the end of December, we're 5,506,000 and some change. So we are continuing to be very healthy in how we're funded there, it really has stayed pretty much anywhere between 4 and 5.5 million. I think 5.5 million might be our high mark this year actually, but most months we have either stayed right about the same or really had just a slight increase in our balance. So yeah, it's very healthy right now. So as long as we stay healthy, it'll stay healthy. So, any questions about that? All right, that's the end of what's on our agenda today. Mr. Reader, is there anything else that you'd like us to discuss today?
We have several visitors here today. I appreciate your contribution, Mr. Wilkerson. It's nice to have you here as well, Lanny. So, anybody else want to throw out something at these guys? This insurance is a pretty important thing, you know, throughout retaining employees especially. For keeping our employees. I appreciate what Gabe said, is that we have one of the better plans in the area, so that should help us retain some employees and if we can go up against them, so to speak, other employers or in the private sector.
You know, you notice in our comparison set, a lot of times they use the 10 to 12 schools in the metropolitan area, and we fall low, you know, when it comes to comparison. But I think in the benefits the last time around, we were number 2. We were right behind Lee Summit, I believe. So yes, it is a good plan. And the thing about Lockton, you know, I hate to say this when Matt's sitting in the room, but the thing about them is that they've done a very good job of helping our people understand. Because I don't think they understood what kind of benefit plan that they had.
Right.
So their marketing team and their communications team has done a good job of that. And if there's a way that we can utilize that as we try to recruit people and, you know, I think the retention piece is helping, but if we can come up with a way on the recruitment side, I do think it is something that's very beneficial for us.
Yeah, and that's hard, especially I think with young people, new teachers, they don't very often think about their benefits as much as they do about their salary. I mean,
Until this point in their life.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Until this point in their life.
Until they have a baby or until they
Or
have a spouse
Yeah.
that they need to have on insurance, things like that, so,
they start taking it out of their paycheck.
yes.
Then they pay attention to what the hell's going on. On this one page here, current contribution, these are the numbers, and is that Blue Saver the high deductible plan that you're in, Gabe? Okay, and I see we got 600 people on that then? So, all right. And would the goal to be getting more and more folks over on
Well,
that?
there's a fine line. We're where we need to be.
Yeah,
There was less than 40 when I took over when I started here in July of 2018.
People, 40 people
There
or
was-
40%?
40 people.
Wow.
Yeah,
And so we beat the bushes pretty good. And you don't want it to go over because you don't want it to,
well, that's where their marketing thing came in and helped
yeah.
by explaining what, hey, you got
I think
choices.
a lot of people didn't understand what an HSA was.
They didn't get it.
Right,
They didn't get it.
the savings thing, yeah.
Technically on that chart, if you looked at the employee only, it's really a negative number. It's not, I mean, they don't contribute anything, but you get $240 or I don't know.
But it's 199.
199.50.
So yeah,
So, I mean-
our board contribution is 795.96, and the high deductible one is 596.11.
So the difference between a PPO is $245.
$200,
Almost
yeah.
$300 between,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm using that for my personal information.
Yes.
And
I was not
also,
offered that great a gap between there. I'm like, why would
yeah,
I do it?
I'm the same way. I do what Gabe does. I mean, I
Well, we didn't
have
before.
$200 a month going to an HSA for me, and
Yeah.
What they were doing before was it was a random number. So they'd say, okay, you get $50. Well, what do you mean you get $50? Why can't I get the difference?
yeah.
Yeah, why would
Or
I
at least to
consider
the
that?
max, you know?
It was a benefit to the district for them to be on it, but not necessarily as much of a benefit to the employee at that time, so. Now, it's a wash for the district, and you know, it again, everybody has to choose what is the right situation for them, so.
Because here, an employee and a spouse on the EPO, which stands for what? employee plan or something?
Well, that's the, how would you describe that, Matt?
Yeah, so,
That's the Cadillac
the old
version.
plan used to be an HMO.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
Okay.
that was a way to kind of structure a plan that looked like that, because a lot of employees were in that plan, right? So when we think about design, you know, we want to provide a valuable benefit, cost efficient, with as little disruption as we can have, right? So this was a way, actually, to make it look like an HMO. The EPO network is probably a little better. But that was the starting point of this. So now what you've got is, you already have some migration into another plan. That one, you know, using old healthcare reform terms, I say old because that was like 10 years ago it came out, you know, you had gold plans, silver plans, bronze plans, like that one's still a double-plated gold, you know, plan. So we started getting into conversations like, is this really a disservice to offer and ask people to pay that? Because it's kind of like over-insurance, like, you know, you don't really need that much insurance. Some people might benefit from it, but you start getting into that, like, do you really need this gold-plated plan? Because you can see it's pretty expensive to buy that. So what kind of makes more sense that's affordable under that? So that's kind of what Robert's getting at, just some thinking about what would still be valuable benefit that's appropriate. Yeah.
okay, I want everybody to realize I kept everybody on 1 hour, 1 minute overtime.
Shame on you.
Next time I'm gonna go for 5 minutes.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you
Well,
guys.
what is your deductible then, like maximum out of pocket type thing?
8,000.
8,000, okay. 8,000 maximum out of pocket. Yeah, well,
For a family.
That's
he's got the high
individuals,
deductible,
individuals.
still would be,
4,000 on individual.
Individuals.
what you save each year, you have to pay it out then.
Do we make a
Oh,
motion to
yeah, I
adjourn?
haven't even looked at it. Oh,
We
I'll
are
make a motion to adjourn.
downstairs.
Okay.
Huh?